to do A or whether I'm going to do B. And I almost bet if I can successfully get through this podcast without ever mentioning the certain key words for this thing to be searched, found, and projected, that if I could say exactly the same thing I said on the last one, and they probably never even know it went through because their algorithm's looking for those key hot buttons. Why is they looking for those key hot buttons? Because they've learned those are the things they can use to manipulate the result they want out of our society. It's been going on for a long time. We just refused, for whatever reason, to be able to see it because during Reeves' political career, as he was looking into the communist activities, then Martin Dies was another political man to come along there, and he kind of got to working in his Reeves, and he began a committee called Un-American Activities Committee, which was the one that began all the hearings that we read about and hear about from 1948 going on into the early 1950s during that so-called period of the Red Scare, where they were rounding up people in the media, imagine that, in the movie business, imagine that, in the political arenas, and they were accusing them of being communists and throwing them out, and they had arrested some people and put them in jail, and in fact, there was one of, what was his name, Remington, is that was his name, Mr. Remington, I believe it was. That I may be wrong on his name, but they arrested him, and a year later, somebody beat him to death in prison because, it was kind of like child molesters when they go to jail today. They're not safe. And everybody was all on ends about the communism, which, it's amazing how we're right back to that. Hello? Only the Democrats were the ones being accused, and the Republicans were the ones pointing their finger at them. And then now we're twisting around, with old Trump. What was the Democrats saying? Oh, Trump's he's a communist. He's over there with because they're trying to twist that whole thing around. They're just repeating what's already went on, but it didn't work out so well for them this time around. The fact of the matter is, the Socialist Communist Party has infiltrated the Democratic Party, same then as it is now, and it is more so now than it was then. Because we have this socialist mentality that has been propagated into our society, and it's been going on since early in the 40s, and probably before that. Through these investigations and these hearings that came up in the 1948s, you can go back and look through those things. You'll find that they found that the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Carnegies, they were investing in universities and really big in them because they were pushing grant money and money into the social sciences. And why was that? Because they were wanting to try and learn how to use these techniques they still use today in order to control the masses, to keep people going where they want to go and keep them voting the way they want them to vote, keep them doing what they want them to do. And they control it through select information that they put out in certain places in certain times, and they keep these things moving forward in the directions that they want them to go. And the people with the big money, they were involved then, they're involved now. And even though a lot of that got misconstrued and got blowed up just like it does today, they use it for their own political purposes, there is essences, parts of that that's absolutely true. You pay attention to the commercials on your TV, and you pay attention to the political agendas and the whims that your political propaganda machine is pushing forward, you will find that those commercials on that TV will change and mold towards whatever imagery or whatever direction that political platform coming from the Democratic Party mainly is trying to promote. We see more nonsense on that TV, on commercials and all those things than ever did before dealing with social issues. Used to, when you saw commercials, it was Colgate trying to sell you toothpaste. And we still got some of those commercials, but the majority of these commercials that come across these TVs, you look at what they're talking about. You look at what they're trying to push through. You look at the scenery in the commercial and what's going on that you're watching with the visual imagery, trying to desensitize you into whatever subject matter they're trying to get you to go into. Reeves believed that the New Deal was one of the biggest detriments to this country, and I tend to agree with him on that. The more I look into those things, and the more I see what's going on with some of that stuff, I'm going to read you a little clip here from some of the investigations of what Reeves' ideas and Dobbs's ideas were during one of the committees. Here's a little clip from when they were looking into academic deals. It says the committee called members of the academic community to give evidence on the nature of the research conducted with the foundation grants, because they were investigating these grants, these foundations that were given all these nonprofit organizations. Does that sound familiar? And the money that was going through was going into these grants that were going into research that was being conducted. Does that sound any familiar to you at all? Boy, it does to me. And anyway, so reading on here, he says, Dr. A.H. Hobbs, the assistant professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, seemed to be an ideal witness for the committee. Hobbs called himself an oldest assistant professor east of the Rockies and continued, he attributed his criticism of methods used in social science research founded by foundations. The committee believed Hobbes' dissidence and independent mind resulted in the suppression of academic freedom. He charged that the foundation grants adversely affected moral, political, and the country's military policy, citing the Kinsey reports on sexual behavior of men and women, the volumes written by social science on the American soldier, and Stuart Case's proper study of mankind. Hobbes attacked the foundations that sponsored these studies, the scientists who conducted them, and the methodology behind the studies. When Representative P. Frost questioned the relationship of the Kinsley report to the investigation, Wormsley pointed out that Rockefeller Foundation sponsored the study through grant to the National Research Council Committee on Sex. He also justified Hobbes' testimony by the example of the effect that such publications have on the public, especially through the television and the radio. See there, they knew this stuff was going on by the propaganda machine that they were using and putting forth, and it's no different today. We have propaganda on the radio and the television and all these things, but we also have these social media platforms, which is actually a more influential influence now than the TV and the radio, because there's more people with them little cell phones flipping around there running through those social media platforms than there are watching TVs and radios. So we're using every aspect of every bit of this stuff in order to get people to go the direction that the machine wants them to go, whichever way that may be. And we've got to get back to thinking for ourselves. We got to get back to understanding who we are as individuals and realize that we are an American. We're not a global people. We are a United States of America people. And we still have countries divided in this world. And I know they're pushing towards the global market. They want one world currency. They want a one consecutive government. They want socialism worldwide so that everybody's under the one rule and one thumb and moving along together. And they've got a lot of it in place. And I know that most part of it is where people are probably never going to wake up to the reality of it. They're probably not going to change the course of which we're on, but I'm still barking. I still have to bark about it. Here's Mr. Reece. Mr. Reece, he says, his experience in the banking and economic fields fueled much of his criticism, and in a Lincoln Day address, he describes the New Deal era as a period of broken promises, betrayal of trust, economic and political bondage. He calculated that although 1/3 of American income went towards the government spent only $1 out of 6 for its relief. Reece believed that the government's increase in taxes for business resulted in higher unemployment rates, the government competition or resulting in the government competition in industry, and increased the worries about business security. So he believed that because the way the New Deal was put together, that it caused all these business owners to go into a self-preservation mode, and so they started hoarding money back instead of putting it into business and expanding business, which what did that do? That benefited the bankers. Mr. Rockefeller and Carnegie and all those big banking people, they enjoyed that because now we got all this surplus of cash that they started pulling in back, and then they began to tax. And you see, these people are pulling strings that you and I don't even think about. They like it that way. They like the being mass control. And this big government overreach, this socialized government that started in this New Deal era that never did get kicked back out and stopped, these social reform programs, they are the beginning of the demise to allow that socialistic attitude into our government. And these guys that were enforcing all that, they've started investing in the school systems. They started investing in all these other avenues, and we don't have time to get into all that today, but this just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I realize both parties use it for political football. They kick things back and forth, but I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an American. And I vote every time I get a chance to vote, and I vote for the man or the woman that is running for the office that stands up on the values of this country and how it was founded and understands the Constitution. But the last two state representatives that have come through my office looking for a handout of money could not answer the basic element questions of what the government's responsibility is towards the people and the state representatives that take their office, what their responsibility is towards the Constitution. They give me these lame college answers instead of what the Constitution of the United States declares in itself. And they can't even give me the definition of the most important role of an American, and that is a citizen. To uphold the duties of the Constitution and stand up for the freedom and the values for the next generation to come. You see, we have a responsibility, people, not to allow these things to continue, not for our own benefit, but for our kids and those kids to come. You know, after the convention or at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and forefathers fought for months and months and months meeting together to develop our Constitution and the republic of which we stand. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin come out of the hall and a woman said, Mr. Franklin, what type of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. Well, what did he mean by that? He knew that if we did not remain virtuous, moral people. Now that moral people does not mean sexually pure, okay? Moral people do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. That's what he's talking about. An educated, moral people, that we would not hold this government true. And this government has become, I seen a guy wearing a t-shirt the other day said, our government is the government that our forefathers warned us about. And we're not far from that if we haven't actually arrived to it. You see, the American people have forgot that we have the power of the purse. That is the most important tool in a republic. And we need to learn how to use the power of the purse. You see, if we want to function and control our own destiny, then we have to stand up and take responsibility for that destiny. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, Paul's writing to Timothy and he's telling him, he's saying this know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without moral affection, truce breakers, false accusers, indignant, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such, turn away. Folks,